When AMD emailed me and said, hey, we need to get you hooked up with one of our newer model graphics cards, I was like, oh, wow, that'd be nice. But I wasn't really putting a lot of huge expectation on that. But sure enough, within like a week or two later, I get an email and they're saying, hey, how would you like to look at the 5600 XT? And I'm thinking, okay, yeah, definitely. I've been running the RX 580 in my test bench for a while, and it's getting a little long in the tooth. And before that, I had an R9 290X Crossfire setup. I loved Crossfire, and I still do. But Crossfire is something that's just becoming more and more, it's just, well, it's basically dead. And there's no point in having Crossfire. I've gone through a lot of headaches, but it's gotten to the point where just any game comes out and it's not supported. And it's like, well, what's the point? So in my quest to find a new card, I was looking for something that just wasn't going to cost me an arm and a leg, because let's face it, I'm broke and I don't have a ton of money to spend, but I really, really wanted to be able to run at an average of 144 frames per second. I got a 144 Hertz monitor. It is awesome, and when I get to play at 144 frames per second, the smoothness is amazing. Once I realized how much that motion blur just affects my eyes and just ruins the feel of my head, like you get that kind of eye strain headache when you don't have a high frame rate like that. I was like, oh, yeah. Now, of course, that frame rate only matters if you have the monitor to support it, but once you have a 144 Hertz monitor, you gotta have 144 frame per second graphics card. Well, I didn't have that with games only supporting one of my R9 290Xs. So I ended up going with the used GTX 980 Ti. And I was able to get that for a little over $200, and it was a great option to get me higher frame rates and help me not have to spend too much money. So last year, if you've been following my channel, I did a series of videos where I talked about how now is not the time to buy a new graphics card. And a lot of that had to do with just the price. You know, when the 5700 XT released, it was like looking, it was gonna be like $499, but then AMD had readjusted the price and it dropped it down to like $449, and there might have been another price adjustment in there. You know, I'm having trouble remembering every detail, but I was like, that's really pricey for what should be like a successor to kind of that RX 580, 570 section. And we also have all these new technologies. We got NVIDIA, who still hasn't gotten down to 7nm yet with the manufacturing process. And then we have AMD, who's kind of started to work with some of the ray tracing, and NVIDIA just barely released their first ray tracing cards, and everything's really new. So my thought was, this is a year that we're going to see some massive improvements, and your dollar is going to go a lot farther. So I got a used card I recommended holding out to for next gen cards, and then the competition heated up. And that's kind of where we find ourselves today now. We find ourselves in a situation where AMD has the 5600 XT card. They've recently done a boost to the memory so that the memory can run at a bandwidth of 14 gigabits per second, which boosts the performance even a little more. And so the question comes is it maybe time to consider that graphics card's upgrade? Well, let's come back to that question and let's look at performance. So AMD let me review the XFX THICC 2, the 5600 XT. And so one of the first things I did was my straight up frame rate comparisons, just doing an average frames per second. And basically, all of my cards were pretty dated, and you could tell. If you look at benchmarks and synthetic numbers on videocardbenchmark.net, it looks like the 980 Ti and the 5600 XT are pretty close to each other, with maybe a slight edge to NVIDIA. But in the titles that I tested, the 5600 XT was pulling ahead on almost every one. In titles that AMD doesn't even usually pull ahead, like World of Warcraft, I've never seen the day where AMD gets to win that battle so decisively. That's usually just a flat-out NVIDIA favored title. And then when you look at the RX 580, you just saw these massive frame jumps where it would be sometimes 40, 50, even 60%. If you play Fortnite and you're wanting to run on epic settings, I saw a 60% improvement over the RX 580, which was phenomenal. So, the question then came from me though, what does this really mean? In practicality, I get this massive boost of performance. What does this mean to me as a gamer when I set the settings and press play? Well, I decided to test out, and what I did, and this is what I'm calling my 144 Hz review. And what I did is I measured all my game settings to get myself around that 144 Hz range. If I maxed out settings and I was still above it, then great. I mean, it's knocking it out of the park. And if I could get in that range of around 120 to 144 Hertz, I was good with it. Well, frames per second. And the reason why is that there's a lot of 144 Hertz FreeSync monitors that are very affordable. I mean, in the 150 to 200 range, 250 maybe tops. At least last I checked. Man, I forgot to check that. So I'll overlay a screenshot of some Amazon shopping that I've done. But because FreeSync monitors are so accessible and getting that 144 Hz is not difficult anymore, even though you'll be at 1080p, I thought it was worth testing it. Then I took my RX 580 and did the same thing. I took all those titles and I just axed the settings to get close to that 144 frames per second mark on average so that it would support a 144 Hertz monitor. And what I found was pretty neat. Basically, on average, about 2 to 3 setting tier jumps. So like in the case of Spyro, if you were running like medium settings and you really had to axe it, you could jump that settings quality to ultra. And that is a huge, huge quality of life experience. And guys, that's kind of why this was so big to me. Like this card it just impressed the daylights out of me because I started realizing that I don't really care about high resolution. If I can up game settings and keep a high frame rate, then 1080p is fine. And hey, would I love to be able to play at 1440p or 4K? Sure. Can I afford it? No. And that's where the 5600 XT came into play. Now, here's where it's really important, guys. When I got my GTX 980 Ti, I went to eBay and found a good used one. I, did my homework and stuff, but there's always a little bit of risk there when you're buying used. But I got a good clean one and had to spend over 200 bucks still. Well, the disadvantage of the 980 Ti is it does not support FreeSync. You have to get a 1000 series GTX card or up to be able to turn on FreeSync. And that hits it hard, so that even though 980s are cheaper, I think I saw them on eBay for around 150, but I wasn't sure because the bids were still kind of not close to ending and there's not as many. So I was like, all right, well, if I want at least FreeSync, I need a 1070. And guys, I think if you're lucky, you could get a good deal for around 200, but I think most of you after shipping would end up paying, at least in the US, closer to $250 to get a used 1070. And if you're getting a 1070 Ti, you're going to just spend even more. Now, even though the performance is comparable, in my benchmarks, this guy definitely held its own and actually held pretty decent leads on the 980 Ti. This card is running about $290. You get a brand new card, up-to-date features, and we haven't even gotten to RIS or Radeon Boost, which I'm going to cover in another video. It's a no-brainer at that point. Like, this is a good deal, and you get the gaming bundles, which I just found out about today, which has some awesome free games and like 3 months of Xbox Game Pass. I mean, that's a really good deal. And that really changed my mind. I mean, I do wish this price was maybe closer to like 250 to 275 range. That would make me feel better about it. Because I'm still used to the idea of a budget card being around 250 bucks and not pushing that 300 envelope. But when the used options out there are that expensive, I would rather spend $290 and get new. Guys, I can kind of safely recommend a 5600 XT and say, hey, it's going to probably be a while before we see Navi 2, and if you're really just ready to get that upgrade and you're running something equivalent to an RX 580 in performance, yeah, this card, it's gonna feel nice. It's gonna feel really nice. Now, the XFX version. Wow. I have the Nitro Plus for the RX 580, and one thing I noticed instantly is the board did not have a lot of rigidness in it. The card sags, plain and simple, and it is not the bracket, it is the card. And so when I got this card installed, I mean, XFX did a great job of just making it really rigid. It doesn't droop. It feels a little bit like a brick, although not very heavy, which is nice too. They've got a great back plate that just kind of transitions into this very smooth shroud. Look at this grill in here. I mean, it looks nice. It is a great looking card. Some of you may not be as wild about the brass color on the fans, but for the kind of builder that XFX is trying to attract, they did a great job. No RGB lighting, nothing crazy or fancy, just a straight, flat, professional looking card. I wish it had RGB because I'm an RGB nut, but dang guys, this card looks great. XFX did a great job. I question the naming of THICC too, but it's a great quality card. So guys, I hope this review helps you out a little bit in making a decision. I feel comfortable in recommending that if your frame rates are getting low and you're just, it's like, that's it, I'm done. You know what, 5600 XT seems like a great option, and it's a great, I would say good price point. I would like to see it a little lower, and I would say great, but still, worth the money, yes. However, if you can hold out, I think Navi 2 is still going to be worth the wait. And we still haven't seen what NVIDIA is going to do, but you know, I'm really enjoying what AMD is doing. And I'm going to cover more of their features in another video. And I'm going to talk about why I'm just really enjoying Radeon a lot. And coming from the perspective of having owned an NVIDIA card now for several months, I got a little bit better perspective on that. So guys, let me know what you think though. Do you think it's just time to buy now because Navi 2 and NVIDIA is going to take too long to get you know, budget level parts out there to the market? Or are you with me on kind of thinking, no, I want to wait too? Guys, thanks for checking this video out. Like and subscribe if you want to help me, and I will catch you later.